Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning, at least in North America. Welcome to Ecopia's webinar on geospatial data and AI in public infrastructure decision making. My name is Harneet. I'm the Director of Marketing at Ecopia AI. It's my privilege to welcome an all-star lineup of our guests today. And I'll be introducing first off our moderator for the first session, Brandon Pellin. He's a Senior Director for Public Sector and International Development at Ecopia, and he'll be leading our first session. Before we get started, I want to cover a few housekeeping things with all of you. We have 100 of people who registered for this session, so we thank you all for that. We're already seeing more than 50 of you here, so thank you for joining from all parts of the world. We have a lot of registrations from North America, obviously, but we do have representatives from over 16 countries today. So thank you so much for taking your time to join us for this webinar. And we appreciate your time and we value it. So we want to make sure that you have a good time in this webinar. So before I kick things off to Brandon and introduce the other panelists, I want to make sure that you understand how this platform works. So we want to make sure that you enjoy and engage with the content. So you'll see the slides in front of you. I'm hoping that you're seeing all our faces here. So we are right here. And then on the right side of your screen is you will see a chat option, a Q&A tab. So the chat option is basically has multiple sections. You'll see the public chat option. And if at any point of time you want to say anything to us or talk to us in a public forum, that's the best opportunity for you to do that. I'm going to kickstart the conversation there right away, and feel free to jump in. At the same time, the most important tab for you today will be the Q&A tab. In the Q&A tab, we welcome you to post your questions at any time during the presentation you have a question. So if a panelist is talking about a topic which interests you or you have a question on a certain thing, please post your question there. All the panelists and all the moderators can see the questions, and we've asked the moderators to take up the questions as and when they feel it'll be best asked to the presenters. So most likely at the end, but at any point they feel that a question can add value to the conversation, they would definitely take the question up. We will make sure that we reply to your question and at least ask them in the public forum as and when possible. So thank you for that. I want to say that in advance. Please bring your questions in. It's always the questions from the audience which makes an event much better. So we appreciate that. And again, thank you so much for all of you to join us today. I'm going to kickstart the things with the first session on stormwater planning and development. And I'm going to invite Brandon Pallin, Senior Director at Ecopia, to take over the things. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you very much, Harneet, and thank you to everyone joining us here today. Looking forward to having a very informative and open discussion as it relates to stormwater planning and development. I would love to thank our two panelists here for also joining us. Both of them bring a wealth of information and knowledge when it comes to this topic, and I'm really excited to see where this conversation takes us. The goal of this webinar is to, one, share the knowledge of both of these individuals, but also overview the concepts of leveraging geospatial data and AI and how that's impacting stormwater planning, not just within the communities of St. Louis and Detroit, but across the other 1,800 municipalities in North America that are currently leveraging the stormwater utility fee to better support their infrastructure and development planning. So with that, we'll be discussing some of the challenges, some of the opportunities for collaboration, and more importantly, understanding how different groups are solving these solutions and the approaches they're taking to that. So overall, Ecopia has been supporting several municipalities across the US and in Canada when it comes to their impervious surface delineation. A few of the benefits that Ecopia has been bringing to the table, and I don't want to make this too much of a sales presentation, this is more about an informative discussion, but the things that we're trying to, or the narrative we're trying to bring to the table is the concept of continuous and sustained data development and the importance of having those data sets on an annual basis or on a routine scheduled update to ensure any sort of critical decision making and planning is sustained through these high accuracy data sets. And as we'll talk about here today, that is one of the critical elements that's powering one of our clients here today, the City of Detroit, the Department of Water and Sewerage. And that's something that we're hoping to bring to the table to other consumers. So with that, I'm going to kind of jump right in here and introduce our first panelist. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Rainey, the Chief Information Officer for the City of Detroit Water and Sewerage Department. Dan is an existing customer. Well, I shouldn't say Dan. Detroit Water and Sewage Department is an existing customer of Ecopia since 2019. We've worked hand in hand with them developing a lot of our impervious surface solutions to meet not only their requirements, but of other individuals. And yeah, I'm going to let him introduce himself and kind of give an overview of some of the work they're doing before we start diving in, and then I'll pass it over to Bruce as well.
All right. Well, thanks, Brandon. My name is Dan Rainey. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Detroit Water and Sewage Department. I've been here since 2013. I joined right before the city went into bankruptcy. And so up until 2015, Detroit Water and Sewerage was a regional as well as a local water utility. And during the bankruptcy, and as we emerged from bankruptcy, we separated our department into two entities. One called the Great Lakes Water Authority, which is the organization that makes the water and transmits it to 129 different communities. And then the City of Detroit, which is a collection and distribution utility at this point. And so, so as Brandon mentioned, we've been a customer for a number of years. Today we're using Ecopia to provide us with data that can help us with things like flood mapping, green infrastructure planning. In fact, one of our goals is to become the greenest city in America. I'm sure there's a number of cities that want to do that. So the way that we utilize Ecopia is we have a product called NearMap. So that's a flight as a service agreement that we have, where NearMap flies the city of Detroit 3 times a year. We use one of those flights to derive our impervious area detail. And so the way that we do that is, so we use the flyover data, and then we hand that off to Ecopia, and they use it, that imagery, to classify impervious area, impervious surfaces across the city. And then we slap a parcel around that, and we map it down to the nearest tenth of an acre, is what we've decided to do here. And so that's basically what we do as far as how we do our stormwater user fee. And then that, let's see, just gather my thoughts for a second. So one of the things that we do is we do this capture annually, and we use the Ecopia product to do that. And what this has resulted in is kind of, I would say, stabilization in the results, in that we're not seeing big swings in data every year. We're seeing basically the results of demolitions and new construction, and everything else pretty much stays within what they did the previous flight. And so for us, that's the best scenario that we have, because it provides consistency. And that's really kind of our message, is that our approach is a consistent approach. And it's based on science, and not previously what we would do is we would ship off the flight data to a third party who would mark up the imagery with their determination of impervious surfaces. And for us, that really did not have the accuracy over time that we wanted to see. And what we were hoping, or what we have shown, is that by using the Ecopia platform for us, it does give us consistency. So that's kind of our story.
Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it. And really looking forward to diving into some of those benefits, challenges, and some of your existing framework as we continue the discussion. And next, I'd like to introduce Bruce Litzinger from St. Louis. And St. Louis actually isn't an existing customer of Ecopia's, although we are in active discussions with them and trying to support them as they are, working through their efforts of integrating a stormwater utility fee and, helping to educate. I wanted to make sure that this discussion enabled an open platform from both sides. So, someone who's leveraging our data sets versus someone who already has an existing methodology or an existing approach. One of the primary things that we see is there's a lot of different ways that people are going about doing, whether it's a stormwater utility fee calculation or simply trying to fund their stormwater planning and infrastructure development efforts. And with that, we want to be as transparent as possible. And one of the things that we found is there's a lack of education behind what are the resources available to groups, what are existing municipalities doing in terms of integrating these solutions. And that's where this conversation is going to come to play. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Bruce and let himself introduce the great work that they're doing in St. Louis and where they're going from there. Thanks so much, Bruce.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. As Brandon said, I'm Bruce Litzinger. I'm the assistant director in our engineering department over the planning division. And our main use of GIS and impervious area is related to billing. We've had an impervious layer of our area for over 15 years, and we've been struggling with how to handle stormwater funding for probably over 20 years, and we're not there yet. And I'll share a little bit of my pain, or our pain, in where we're at. Basically, just a little bit about who we are. MSD is the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. So we are two utilities. We are a political subdistrict of the state. So we serve a two-county area. We have a wastewater utility and a stormwater utility. On the wastewater side, we're large. We've got 7 treatment plants, 350 million gallons of daily flow, and probably the 4th largest size utility by miles of pipe. Unfortunately, our 1.3 million customers ranks much lower than that. So we've got funding. It's a burden to bear per foot of sewer. So on the wastewater side, I'm not going to talk about that too much. We've got everything in order. We're well funded. Our commitments are clear. With consent decrees on wet weather issues, we know what we need to do on overflows of sanitary sewer and combined sewer, things like that. But on the stormwater side, funding has been our challenge. We've got about 3,000 miles of sewer that we maintain. We've got we're a phase 2 MS4 city, and we've got we've got 90 municipalities in our jurisdiction. And we are co-permittees on the phase 2 side with 60 of them. The rest are exempt because of either the combined sewer or they're just too small, below 1,000 population. So, but the regulatory program, we've got a 2-cent ad valorem tax that is on real estate property that's paid, and that covers our regulatory work. We had a public vote for a 10-cent ad valorem real estate property tax in 2016 that passed, and that gave us, for the first time, district-wide revenue source to maintain the existing 3,000 miles of sewer. We're still struggling with funding new improvements, and for us, that largely means erosion and flooding. So, but that's not to say we haven't implemented some things on impervious area and funding. For example, I'll maybe switch over to this next slide. We have used impervious area for stormwater fees. Once in 2008, we implemented a fee. Well, I should back up and maybe say the first effort was long before that, and it couldn't get it off the ground. But in 2008, we implemented a fee. We were immediately sued on it, and we lost the lawsuit under a law that was unique to the state of Missouri, called the Hancock Amendment, which says if it looks like a tax, you have to get it voted on. We implemented it as a fee, which we thought was not a tax, lost that lawsuit. So we stopped collecting that in 2010. And then we got as I mentioned before, got our operation and maintenance tax passed. And then the last step was to check that third box of services in a proposed 2019 impervious area fee that was going to be voted on. And we lost that vote by 3 percentage points. But what we were proposing was to use, previously we had implemented impervious area to the 100 square foot and then build so many cents per 100 square foot increment. In this later approach, we decided to take a lot of the customer service out of it, from the standpoint of, I don't have 2,100 square feet. I have 1,900 square feet. So we thought we would make it simpler for the customers, and we went with 4 tiers, and went with an equivalent residential unit, which is the median of all the residential households, which was 2,600 square feet. So we put everybody in a tier, and that was kind of how we proposed that. And you can kind of see what we were working from is we've had an impervious layer for many years, and we simply update it. And there's some issues with the way we do it, and some work that has to happen. But you can kind of see there where we're using rooftops and sidewalks and driveways, and those are we get aerial photography. The firm hand draws them. It comes to us. We've got a couple cartographers that will take the data and clean it up. For example, we do not bill on right-of-way, so at the property lines there on the red, you can see we clip the sidewalk, for example, and then that becomes non-billable for the purpose of that customer. I'll flip to the next slide here. So to kind of let you know our existing efforts here, we lost that 2019 vote. We're kind of regrouping. We're going back, talking to our customers, making sure we have that public support. Here's some slides that we use in that public outreach program, which we just finished in the fall. But basically, we communicate what issues we're seeing. Here's just a mild example of erosion that we have in our area, where the creek flows took away the bank of the creek, and it even took away part of the roadway. We also have flooding, which we would characterize as localized flooding, where maybe it's just a flat area or a little bit of a bowl area, and the water can't get out, and it's just needs a storm sewer. And the area was developed long before there were storm sewers and standards and all the current development review requirements that we have nowadays. And then there's the question of regional flooding, which there's many parties that be it the Corps of Engineers and the municipalities that would have a role in that. But each dot on here is one of the 6,500 stormwater complaints that we've gotten over the years. So it's everywhere within our MSD service territory, which includes the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and then St. Louis County, or rather 80% of St. Louis County. So, and these are the questions we've asked the public. We've got an online poll. We've asked people to give us their responses. We did over a dozen town halls, and asked people for input in that regard. And largely, especially after the presentation, people understand there's local stormwater problems. They understand, that MSD is in the best position to solve those stormwater problems with the solutions we can construct if we had the capital funding. Are they willing to pay? Largely, they are willing to pay, but not much. About $1 or $2 a month. And then would they prefer to pay by for the solutions via an impervious area tax or a property tax like we do now? And it was split. There was no clear direction from the public. I mean, the way we communicated is the impervious area is just implied to be more fair because people that have larger impervious area pay more. They have more runoff, cause more problems. People with smaller properties, smaller impervious areas would pay less. That just seems fair, and that resonates with people. On the other hand, the property tax, it's just a lot simpler to administer, and we're probably, for us to implement it with billing and everything else, it's probably $1 million a year on, say, a $30 million program. So it's like a 3% cost of doing business, whereas the property tax is there's no delinquencies, things like that. But then there's other issues such as the nonprofits don't pay property tax, things like that. So we're struggling with all that. We as staff will present something to our board at some point, and we're kind of in the planning stages right now. But as we speak, we're updating once again our impervious area that we had used in the past to prepare, because that's part of our case. So, and that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Bruce. That was an extremely detailed answer, and I really appreciate that introduction. And hopefully, all those attending this audience or this panel right now appreciate that as well. And I think one of the primary takeaways that you mentioned there is all of these challenges. And it's not so simple as just saying, okay, we need a stormwater utility fee, or stormwater usage fee, or however you're calling it in your unique district, as just saying, okay, let's just go integrate this. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken. There's a lot of challenges. You started talking about the concepts of, whether as it relates to geospatial, some of those issues of like the heads up updating, maintaining those data sets and the inconsistencies that can come from that. And that's kind of leading to where we're going to start this kind of engaging panel. And for the audience here, essentially the way that this is going to work is I have a few questions that have been shared previously with our panelists, so they have an idea of what I'm going to ask. But also, I would love for this to be interactive. So if there's any questions as we start going through here, as we start talking, and you want to dive into something a little bit more, feel free to post in that Q&A. And I'll try to integrate it as best as possible. If not, we'll make sure there's some time at the end to go over some of those questions. So the first topic is building off exactly where we just left off, in the sense that what are some of the challenges that your district has faced integrating a stormwater utility fee or a stormwater usage fee, or however we're calling it, and how have you dealt with these? So topics of focus here are going to be updating maintenance, political sign-off, community outreach. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Dan to kick things off in terms of the discussion, because I think Bruce kind of highlighted a few of those already. And let's see where the discussion takes us from there.
Yep. So, so when Detroit was a more populous city, like we had 2 million people back in the 1950s, we actually, I believe, were charging for drainage or stormwater fees back then, in the 70s at least. And the way that was done is it was a function of your water meter size, which made perfect sense when the city was absolutely full. So if you had a 5/8 inch meter, that was generally a residential service. If you had a 6-inch meter, that was industrial. There were different tiers based on the size of the water meter you had. As the city changed, as the population left the city and more open space came in, we were faced with, this was no longer a fair way of administering a stormwater usage fee. And so that's where we leverage the GIS and the flyover data, and started with the human sort of updating of impervious area, impervious surfaces, and then now moving more towards an automated or semi-automated process. It's not to say that everything is all roses these days either. We've certainly had some challenges as we've gotten better at updating this data. In that now we're doing a flyover every year, and so there's alignment between our assessor's records and our imagery and our impervious area calculation. And so now that drives consistency, which is what everybody wants to see, because then there's no surprises. It's not to say that it's still not a political process to some extent. You know, we do have a strong mayor here in the city of Detroit, fairly strong, very strong. Mayor Duggan's very strong there. And, you know, we want to make sure, I'm sure he does, that what we're doing makes perfect sense to everybody, from our legal team to our public affairs staff to the city council, and our board of directors as well, the board of commissioners. So we do a lot of outreach with whatever we're going to be doing, especially when we took on this impervious area, impervious surface categorization as a methodology. We spent a lot of time educating our customers, because to them, this was rainwater, you know, and that messaging was not lost on people, you know. But the problem is we have a combined sewer system here, and nothing's separated. And so, at least for the most part, nothing's separated. And so we have to do something to pay for the water treatment that occurs inside the wastewater treatment plant for storm runoff.
Sure. So Bruce, the one thing I before I pass it over, sorry, Dan, before I pass it over to Bruce, one of the elements that you brought up there is the concept of these outreach strategies and the value of communicating what you're doing with the constituents and you know, the citizens of Detroit. How have you found, because I know Detroit enables that product to be publicly visible, so the impervious layers, you can see it directly on your parcel. Has that improved in terms of having access or limiting the complaints that you face? Because I know that's one of the challenges that a lot of municipalities face.
So once we got our data sets all aligned, that's tampered down on the complaints, because now people are seeing what they see in front of them. But sometimes before, we may have had imagery from one year and impervious area updates from another year, you know, and so that wasn't consistent with what was going on in front of the eyes of our customers. Now, generally speaking, it is, and we have a pretty good process as far as how to handle complaints. So as far as, you know, doing surveys and that sort of thing, we're hoping to get to something a little bit more proactive, I guess, that relies more on the flyover data versus trying to roll trucks and measure up, you know, acres and acres of land, where maybe if we're doing a flyover every year, we could catch on the backside, you know, and just do an adjustment if it's warranted, you know. But generally speaking, the city's turning a corner now to where we were doing a lot of demolitions, so we were taking away a lot of pervious surface. Now we're actually putting more back because there's growth now.
Sure. And one of those numbers, just for the audience, year over year, in terms of Detroit since 2019, the average delta discrepancy is about 2% change in impervious layers. And for anyone that does have a stormwater utility fee, that integration and being able to adapt those prices is very important to making sure people are happy, especially if they are reducing the level of impervious layers within their residential property and thereby bringing down their fee. And with that, thank you very much, Dan. I'm going to pass it over to Bruce to maybe kind of comment and build off of what you were already alluding to in terms of some of these challenges that you've discussed. And I also do want to say that I'm seeing a lot of great questions come in. I will try to integrate them as we go, as I said, but we'll make sure we have some time at the end to address them.
Yeah, so I'll talk about, I'll touch on the political and then also the technical aspects of implementing a stormwater utility fee. Politically, we've had several rounds, as I mentioned. I think the first, and I agree, I mean, the key is getting broad consensus and buy-in. And I think the thing that tripped us up historically is overlooking a particular stakeholder group that became very influential. For example, originally we were going to implement this fee, and then the large malls and large stores got wind of it and politically shut it down very quickly. So the next time we went, we did a lot of outreach. We got a lot of universal buy-in from municipalities, as I mentioned, the 90 some odd municipalities, from the public, from business leaders, all the sort of thing. We thought we had everything in place and we had good momentum. And we implemented that fee in 2008. That was not voted on, but we had built support, and we have a public process. We're a public agency. And then what happened is we realized that out of the we have about 430,000 wastewater customers that are also going to get a stormwater bill now. There was about 80,000 customers that did not have a water tap and therefore did not have a wastewater bill, and then started getting the stormwater bill. And some of them were septic tank owners, so they're very large parcels, and a lot of them were very influential. And we ended up with 2 state laws that limited our ability to serve people if they weren't a wastewater user. There was a law along that nature, House Bill 661 we call it, and ultimately it they sued us as well. So that really undermined that effort. But I think not that stakeholder class would be would always agree with the fee, but they were kind of hit cold, and they were shocked, and all of a sudden this thing showed up, and so they became very indignant. It wasn't just a matter of we disagree, it's just we violently disagree with the violating our rights and whatever else. So that was one. On the technical side, I think there's two issues we deal with. One is we are not the county, and the county maintains the parcel layer for property tax and other purposes. So we coordinate with them. So, and the GPS accuracy of that layer has varied over time. We think it's pretty good today, but very smart people were able to put some code behind our work to match up. For example, we may have a building that crosses a property line. We'll look at the centroid of the building shape and apply it to the parcel, the centroid of the parcel, so it gets properly aligned. So we handled a lot of the errors and inaccuracies in our GIS system. And then the other thing is just making a lot of things that are unique and different, making them right. It's just a manual effort for us to some degree. If it's it could be like a shared driveway on a 2 private lots, and how we cut that and assign it and things like that is a fair amount of work. So and then the last piece is we have an MSD. We have our wastewater billing department. They were going to bill for stormwater. That database system has a unique data set that's unique from our GIS system, which is based on the county parcels. So we need to take a parcel ID and match it with the proper billing account, and it's right now by address, and addresses vary from system. So that's a tough challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge we're dealing with right now, is getting those two databases to link up. Now, when we did it in 2008, that was an effort, and we maintained it through the billing customer service relation. But we haven't been doing it for over a decade, so need to reconcile.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think we could dive into the challenges for probably an entire webinar itself. But I do want to make sure we're covering some of the positives and some of the questions. And Thomas Miller has a really great question. I think that resonates with a lot of people. So let me go ahead and read that for everyone. As the implementation scale of stormwater management is often at the local scale, have either of you had any particular beneficial or maybe not beneficial experiences with your respective states? I'm curious about how cities can coordinate with other levels of government, state regulators, county drain commissioners, for example, to help keep messaging consistent and communicate more effectively. So essentially, have either of you had any positive experiences with, whether you're talking about the county or the state, in terms of that messaging and communication? Dan, you want to start?
Sure.
I see you're ready to go.
I can say, so I think a lot of it depends. So in Michigan, for instance, I live out in the suburbs, and in my neck of the woods, stormwater is a separate utility. It drains off to a drainage ditch. It's maintained by the county drain commissioner. Most of the cities that surround the city of Detroit, including the city of Detroit, are combined sewer systems. So that's where you guys all know this. That's where the stormwater in the street combines with the sewage out of the homes, and so that makes it for a messier sort of thing for us. So I think that to answer the question, it really sort of depends on the circumstance around it. If it's an alignment, the messaging makes perfect sense. But the messaging that we have in West Bloomfield, where I live, is completely different than the messaging that we have for the city, because that messaging is wrapped around the CSOs. We have combined sewer overflow basins, about 10 of them, that were built in the 90s that we have to maintain, call it our gray water infrastructure. And so that needs to be maintained as part of our EPA.
The Clean Water Act, Clean Water Act requirements, correct? Yeah, that actually, that's going to flow into the next question, but I do want to give Bruce a chance just to quickly answer that. Bruce, if we can keep it just a brief answer here so we can move on.
Yeah, I think we're similar to Dan. I mean, I'd love to say we had a whole team of partners that were all talking from the same script of music and we're all aligned, but and I guess we are to some degree. We work with the State Department of Natural Resources, and we all understand the regulatory program and the impact of non-point source pollution, and we all have literature, and but everybody, I think, is at this part of the city and county also, they have certain rights that they can impact stormwater management, but they largely look at MSD as the stormwater utility, and so that's our issue. So there's not a huge motivator on their part, really, other than, hey, MSD, take care of this, and then MSD says, hey, we don't have any capital funding.
Thank you so much, guys. All right, I'm going to move to the next question on our side, and this is the benefit of, perhaps a lot of people don't understand why these stormwater utility fees or drainage fees are integrated. So I want to dive into, how has integrating a stormwater utility fee improved your stormwater infrastructures in your community? And building off of what we discussed earlier, would meeting the EPA's Clean Water Act's compliance be possible without having this level of fee? And I know, Bruce, you guys are still in the process of integrating or trying. So I think this is more of a question for Dan, based on the fact that they've iterated and have continuously kind of integrated in this kind of experience here.
So I would say that, so one of the things that we did around stormwater management is we put a requirement on any new development that they need to manage their stormwater on their development, or they need to have some exception process to that if they can't do it. And so we issue stormwater permits. We encourage the building of stormwater retention facilities as part of any new construction, integrated on site. And on top of that, we have a green, we call it, what's it? GSI.
The green infrastructure.
Yeah, the green infrastructure program. And so combining these two and getting consistency and hopefully, I'll say consistency in our stormwater methodology across the board allows us to continue to meet the needs of the EPA. So that's that's a moving target, I think. So we did a public-private partnership with the Nature Conservatory out here in Detroit, they're a large nonprofit, and we did where we highlight all the GSI projects, the ones that are funded by the government, the ones that are funded privately, and the ones that people just take on themselves and do like their little rain gardens to build a community awareness around just green infrastructure practices. And I think that, and we keep score, like every time somebody puts in a rain garden, we track those gallons saved. And that all rolls up to gallons managed, which helps us with our EPA mandates, I think.
That's great. And now, Bruce, in terms of the work that you guys are doing, because you haven't had this stormwater utility fee, what other sources of funding are you guys using to supplement this infrastructure development in terms of whether it's seeking grants or is it just general operational budgets? What does that process look like for you guys?
Right. So similar to Detroit, we have a combined sewer system, and we've got CSOs, and we've got a green infrastructure program in that combined area, and our wastewater rates cover those expenses. And we do have a small stormwater capital funds in certain areas. Our original boundary, I didn't get into all that because it's so complex that it doesn't serve the entire area. But we do some stormwater work. But and we're so we use the impervious area. I think it's just for stormwater. As a stormwater manager, one of the first things I read is, your natural streams are not going to be supportive of natural processes if you're over 25% impervious area. I mean, that's kind of EPA's watershed model. You start getting impairments at 10%, and then at 25%, they're not supported. And so that was all valuable in our submittals in our stormwater management plan. We don't have a hard requirement or anything per se, on impervious area, but we do, like Dan said, we do have new development regulations, and we've got over 5,000 stormwater best management practices that new development has been required under our phase 2 permit to put in place to treat new development. And as far as other funding, we're putting in for everything we can on ARPA and expecting opportunities under a bill. And boy, it's just we're not getting clear guidance from our state how they're going to roll that out.
Yeah, that is a very common problem. I was actually attending a conference last week, and it baffles me that people don't realize how much money is available to them through the ARPA, the American Recovery Program. Forgive me if I screwed up the acronym there, but I believe that's correct. And access to resources that could help support stormwater infrastructure development. So for any of our attendees, I encourage you all to look into that and reach out to your respective state correspondences. There is a lot of potential access to resources for that infrastructure development, but also to support even the procurement and access to some of these impervious surface data layers that we're talking about here. And I want to build off of what you mentioned, Bruce, in the concept of the addition to the impervious, the natural layers. And I think this is, I'm going to answer a question as we go on here. Leanne asks, is the vector data that Ecopia provides going to be downloaded into external systems? And can also different mapping types be provided, essentially pervious area as well as natural bodies. So actually, when it comes to the work that we're doing for the City of Detroit Water and Sewage Department, we've now included the city. And the city actually is getting access to, in addition to the impervious layers, the natural layers. So they're getting a unique forest canopy, they're getting the grass layers, they're getting bare land layers, and it's being used for other departments. So this is something that we like to convey, and part of the discussion here is getting and bringing together multiple departments and multiple groups to have access to these data sets. And one of the benefits that Ecopia brings to the table is we can service multiple requirements through one project. So essentially, we're fulfilling, Dan's requirements with those impervious layers, but we're also supporting the city in terms of integrating some of those natural layers, which then have a residual benefit across, perhaps for some of the work that Dan's doing or the DSWD is doing, DWSD, excuse me. And that's kind of one of the things that we always like to bring to the table, is the concept that leveraging our workflow enables access to these data sets that can be customized and tooled to your unique requirements. So I'm keeping track of time here. I see we only have about 15 minutes. So briefly, before I pick up some more questions from the audience, I want to touch on a hypothetical situation. And essentially, if you both were to start from scratch, and if you could, redo this whole process and you had a clean slate, how would you go about starting a stormwater utility fee, or stormwater drainage fee, and what recommendations would you have for other municipalities that are perhaps considering this now? Bruce, you want to start, or Dan, you want to start?
I'll let Bruce start this time.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. I haven't given it a lot of thought because I'm too much of a reality guy, and I know I don't have that option. So, and also you have to factor in that I'm by nature pretty lazy. So I will take. I would probably just do the property tax because that's less work for me. But anyway, that's not the right answer. I think the impervious area, it's what the public, wants from an equity standpoint. That's what we've heard in a lot of our public outreach at some level there. So it's just a question of getting it down to a system that is practical to implement. So I think, first of all, if it's brand new, in the state of Missouri, unfortunately, it looks like it's got to be voted on. So you've got to build that public support. If the public is not just screaming for it and asking for it, the public, not the one that is the property owner that Creek is taking their house away, the everyone in the community, everyone. And some people say, well, why would I pay a fee that's going to impact somebody next to the creek? I'm not next to the creek. And I tell them, well, your impervious area is there, and the water's running off your roof into your downspout over your yard and eventually gets to the creek. So you're contributing to the problem. So I think that public outreach is big. And then on the technical side, I think starting over would be, we'd probably do things, it'd just be knowing some of the issues with the parcels and things like that. We'd probably, start with one database, not try to match two existing databases would be very helpful. And I think the other thing is just we're in a better world. It'd be easier today, I think, a little bit because we don't have all the legacy issues of having a parcel layer that's separate from a our GIS layer and then trying to get everything to match up. So I think it is going smoother than it had in the several previous efforts, and I think it'll to do it fresh. I think I just think about all those things, think it all the way through, and I think it'll go a lot smoother.
So essentially what you're saying is you would start off with a fresh Ecopia data layer.
That would be very, we're looking at that, and there's a lot of advantages to a non-manual effort.
No, I'm obviously plugging, but in terms of Dan, I'm going to let you quickly answer this. I know go ahead.
So if I was going to start a stormwater user fee program from scratch, I think one of the things that you need to really do is look across your customer base. So we're a pretty large city, 139 square miles, about almost 400,000 parcels. And so really understanding who makes up that parcel base. And as you're implementing a system like this, what is the fairest way to do it for the fairest and legally defensible way? In Michigan, they have anti-tax legislation called it's called the Headley Amendment or the Headley Law, that basically says you cannot tax somebody for a service they never used, right? So things like stormwater separation projects that tax one side of town before the other side of town gets the benefit of it, they can't do that here. You have to find a way to either circumvent that somehow, or so you need to understand what's legally defensible, basically, and make sure that you put a program in that is going to save your legal team a lot of trouble if you can.
And would you say the public visibility of that product is something that's critical in terms of?
I think publicly available. So having a process to elevate your concerns in a way that you could illustrate by going to your parcel and printing it out. So I worked in Ann Arbor as their CIO before I came to Detroit Water, and we had a whole process where you could go to a website and print out your parcel's impervious coverage, and if you had a complaint, you just simply bought that piece of paper with it right to the engineering group that was going to look at it. So this is what I disagree with, and then you could have it's easier. Then you had a common sort of understanding of what the issue was,
Sure, for sure. So Bruce, I'm going to follow up here, and guys, thank you so much for all these great questions. Kevin Korth has a question specifically for you, Bruce, and I know the answer myself, but I'm going to let you dive into it. Have you explored cost comparisons between using the AI methodology for impervious surface mapping versus paying a consultant to digitize imagery? Any concerns on the turnaround time of the digitized data being outdated by the time the capture is delivered and the digitizing effort is complete?
Yeah, so we do aerials about every other year, and it probably takes us a year to get the final impervious area data, or at least it has seemed like it has the last couple of times. And I think to use we're evaluating Ecopia, and I think we're going to see, if everything pans out, substantial savings. I'm going to say double-digit % improvement. I failed to, we haven't locked in on prices and all that, so I don't know. But it's going to be significant. It's going to be significant that if we're doing this long run, we're probably going to go in that direction to save money. I think the concern is now is we're doing an update, and we've got so many issues we're dealing with right now to go into the world of unknown or create a new relationship. A little hesitant to do that right now, just for a typical 2-year update. So we'll probably, if we do get this thing funded and the public does support it, we'll be looking at other options going forward, and we anticipate significant cost savings.
Dan, I'm going to pass that to you as well, because literally this is exactly how you started your program, in the sense of going from a manual approach to leveraging our AI services. So maybe you can touch on that a little bit and actually provide a little bit more.
So our experience has been, so we're doing a near map flyover. They provide that flyover data within about between 4 and 6 weeks after capture. And then we hand it off to Ecopia, and they get it back to us within 2 months, typically, or less. Right? Is that about right?
Yeah, I think right now, actually, our standard turnaround time is about 4 weeks for a municipality. Some of the challenges we face is more on making sure the contracting teams can get the paperwork out in time. that's some of the challenges that we face. And Dan can speak to that. Half the time we've been sitting on data waiting to deliver it to them, but we're just waiting on the procurement teams to make sure. And we do have a multi-year contract with the city of Detroit, so that helps. But definitely with the limitation isn't really on our processing side. It's more on the ability to get the contracts all in place. Next question. From Regina Filson, and I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. Have either of you installed lead-free pipes as a part of your sewer system design? And perhaps that may not be the most suitable question for the two in this room, but
I think what she talked when you talk lead-free pipes. So we're a wastewater utility, stormwater utility. I think the lead-free pipes is a drinking water utility issue, which is not us. And I know that there's lots of ARPA and other funds going to be directed to that. I will say this: when we do sewer projects, we're the water company. We end up doing the lead lateral replacements when we're going through and tearing through properties. So, and we're working on an arrangement with the water provider.
I see, Dan, you're answering a question for Kevin already separately. Is that correct on the typing there?
I was gonna, yeah. Basically, the question was about how do we tier our business for. So my question, when I answered the question, it was like if I was starting something from scratch, what I would look into. But as far as what we do now is we charge the same rate per acre, regardless of configuration of the property. Whether it's an industrial or commercial or residential property, it's still the same rate.
We were going to do the same thing. We were going to charge the same rate for an ERU, and so if we would just take the total impervious area on the commercial property, divide by the 2,600, which is one ERU, and then we bill them however many ERUs they are.
Sure.
At the ERU rate.
So we are kind of running out of time here. There were a couple more questions, or one last one here in terms of specifically at Ecopia that I'll answer. How is AI used in impervious detection, polygon creation? What can Ecopia offer in this regard? So effectively, the power of AI is multifaceted in terms of our extraction process. But I think the primary benefits, especially as it relates to the impervious surface here, is the rules-based approach in terms of consistency of data creation. So it's not necessarily just about that original data creation, especially for when you're leveraging it for a fee and updating it. It needs to be designed in a way that when you get new imagery and you go to update it, you're not going to have interpretation issues. So if you're calling a sidewalk, one thing one year and you call it a driveway the next year, or for example, you start calling pavement on a house something else the next year, those lead to interpretation issues, which as Dan can probably speak to, cause a significant amount of challenges. So that's probably one of the biggest benefits that the AI brings to the table is the consistency in year-over-year updating, so that data can be integrated a lot easier. And then obviously there's the cost benefit in terms of updating costs. What we've been able to provide to a lot of our customers is a more efficient way for them to get access to data through our licensed data model, but also an efficient way for them to integrate it into their existing workflows, in the sense that we're happy to overlay some of their existing information, integrate their parcel layers. All of that data can be combined to maximize the benefit and utility of what we're providing to the table. So with that, I really want to thank everyone for attending. We had well over 100 attendees here today. But most importantly, I'd really like to thank our two panelists, Dan and Bruce, who provided us with a ton of great information. And I appreciate them taking an hour out of their day to speak with us, and even more than that in terms of planning this. I know there's perhaps a few other questions and whatnot that didn't get answered directly. We'll be sure to reach out to everyone should any follow up. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And with that, I'm going to let it pass over to the next session. And I see Harneet joining us now.
It's my cue now to hand it over to Bill Singleton. Bill is the Vice President at Ecopia AI. He has amazing knowledge and experience working with the public sector. And he's been head at Ecopia for a very long time. So I'm going to hand it over to Bill to introduce himself and introduce our amazing panelists today. Thank you, Bill.
Hi, everyone. Excited. Thank you very much for sticking around and taking some time this afternoon. We're really excited to be talking about sort of the second half of how Ecopia is helping in the public sector, specific to transportation and how we are helping long-term planning for MPOs, state level governments, and the federal government across the country. Really what our main focus is our organization, similar, sort of dovetailing a little bit onto what Brandon was talking about from the previous session, is creating a rules-based approach to create national content from the latest aerial imagery that can be kept up to date on an annual basis. And really what our hopes are is by having this data, we can help improve the applications that GIS experts and planners need to operate with on a daily basis across the country, especially when you're looking at things like ADA compliance, Vision Zero initiatives, which Leah will talk about in a few seconds here, and also with multimodal planning. So we're really excited to have this discussion today. Really, we want to bring together a panel of right-of-way experts so that we can understand a little bit better about how these geospatial solutions can improve the planning and the infrastructure decision-making process. As a quick introduction to Leah Shahum is the founder and director of the Vision Zero Network, a national campaign supporting cities working toward Vision Zero, which is zero traffic fatalities and severe injuries. The network helps communities develop and share best practices for safe mobility for all road users. As a German Marshall Fund Fellow, Leah researched Vision Zero strategies in Sweden, Germany, and the Netherlands. Prior to that, she was the executive director of the 10,000-member San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, which promotes bicycle for everyday transportation. Leah formerly served on the board of directors of the Golden Gate Bridge, Highway, and Transportation District and the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. I'd welcome Leah to give a short introduction to the Vision Zero Network, which we are excited to be a champion sponsor of as we continue to help communities with their intention of making their cities safer.
Thanks so much, Bill. Thanks, Harneed. Everyone who's come together today. Thanks for making time and thanks for your support. Yeah, I'll jump right in. I know we have limited time and I really want to hear your ideas, discussion, and questions. So you heard the intro of Vision Zero. It really is that very bold, but we think the morally right goal of safe mobility for everyone. The goal of zero traffic deaths or severe injuries among all road users. Just a little bit about my background or where I am. I'm in Northern California, but we work with cities and counties across the nation. And I'll show a little map there. Next slide, please. And just double check it. Sorry, am I moving this? Yes. Okay, great. Yes. So to put this in perspective, I probably don't need to share this with those of you on the call because you're probably following it. Unfortunately, we have a public health crisis of traffic crashes and deaths and injuries. More than 42,000 people were killed in preventable traffic crashes in 2020. And I really want to emphasize that word preventable here. What we focus on at Vision Zero is helping people recognize that the traffic safety crisis is not inevitable. It is something that we do have agency over. And honestly, with companies like yours, I know we can do better. And we have a lot of leadership right now around this issue. So a little bit more on the data, because I think it's so important, obviously, to understand where we're starting from, which is a pretty worrisome place. Not only is traffic deaths one of the leading causes of death overall in this country, it's the number one, unfortunately, cause of death of youth in this nation and actually worldwide as well. And certain communities are particularly impacted. We know, for instance, that people walking, it has gotten a lot more dangerous, unfortunately. And within that world, I could go on and tell you more statistics about, unfortunately, Black communities in the US are more likely to have pedestrian safety crashes. Low-income communities in the US are more likely to have safety crashes, traffic crashes and deaths. So within those problems, we have an overall traffic death problem, we have pedestrian safety problem, and then we have certain communities, again, like youth, seniors, I didn't mention, communities of color, low-income folks. So this is really urgent for a lot of reasons. Again, I don't need to tell you all that probably. And really what we're realizing, again, these are not happenstance. I think there's more and more awareness that we're getting the results we've designed for. That's not meant to blame anyone. I don't mean it that way, but rather to step back and say, A, we need to recognize we have a problem. B, we need to acknowledge that we do have control over the problem, that we can make change, that's within our power. So really thinking that we do get the results we designed for. When we're designing, frankly, for speed over safety, we're going to get certain results. Another example, not necessarily maybe in our worlds, but, cars are getting bigger, vehicles are getting bigger. And a lot of recent research is showing, not surprisingly, this is one of the reasons more people are dying as pedestrians. So, thinking about our road design, thinking about our policies, our land use, thinking about vehicle design, these are all levers that we do have control over and which data can help with. So if there's one concept I leave you with in this short time, and I encourage folks to think about our language. These are crashes, not accidents. And again, I say that not so much in a blaming way of who caused it, but rather the way we think about traffic safety really does change. When we think about crashes or collisions or incidents that we can track, we can look ahead and say, okay, what are the common themes or traits here? And then how do we get ahead of that? How do we be proactive? Again, using data, using personal experience to understand where these crashes happen. But again, this language piece, I encourage people to think about and hopefully change and incorporate the word crash rather than accident, because partly we're working here against not only the real problems I talked about with those, we get what we designed for images, but also frankly a cultural challenge of, for too long, kind of accepting, again, not consciously accepting, but kind of accepting, oh, this is the way it is, right? It's unfortunate that, 40,000+ people a year are dying and millions more injured. But, that's a cost of modern day society. It's an unfortunate, tragic cost. That's not the case. It doesn't have to be. So again, this idea of crash, not accident helps us move to a place of more agency and control. I mentioned that we're working with communities around the country. Again, we're a nonprofit. I should have mentioned that. Relatively small nonprofit, but with a really big reach. We are basically supporting and helping connect these communities. It's more than 45 you see on the map. Credit to places like New York City and San Francisco, my hometown where it started. But a lot of diverse communities, everyone from Macon, Georgia to Laredo, Texas to Bellevue, Washington. So smaller communities as well that have made this commitment. And we're recognizing those that have made that public official commitment of zero traffic deaths or Vision Zero. And we won't have time to go into this too much, but I encourage you, if you're interested, we can share info after, or check out our website. Vision Zero is not just a slogan. It's not just a tagline. It's not just a good goal. Obviously, it's a goal, right? You get it? Zero. But it is a paradigm shift in how we're doing business, how we're thinking about safe mobility, how we're talking about it. Like I said, crash, not accident. And of course, most importantly, what we're doing. So this is just a little breakdown. I won't go through all of these, but I'll highlight here the traditional approach versus Vision Zero. One example you'll see on traditional approach, individual responsibility. So yes, certainly, of course, we want to teach our kids to look both ways before they cross the street. We want to educate folks before they go out on the road and drive. There's a world of individual responsibility we need to encourage. We've spent a lot of time there. We need to spend more time, you'll see on the other side, in addition, on the systems approach. And again, that's where I think folks like you all come in to really think about what are the systems people are moving in, right? It's the street design. It's how our speed's set. It's the policies and the environments that we're actually making those behavior choices in. So moving along here, I'm going to be quick, but part of what really underpins Vision Zero, and I said it's not just a slogan, it's not just a tagline, it is a way of doing business. What that kind of way is the safe systems approach. And hopefully you can see this. It's a little hard to read, but I'll kind of highlight that the systems approach is showing at the bottom, or kind of those yellow lines at the bottom, things like strengthening individual skills and knowledge. Again, that's education, that's encouraging people to do the right thing. We want to do that, absolutely. No one's suggesting we don't do that anymore. But we need to be putting more emphasis upstream. And that's what you see in the blue areas. And that really is, changing organizational practices and influencing policies and environment. So in our world, by the way, this is really a public health approach we're borrowing. So really thinking about traffic safety in a public health approach or way, but to say, okay, if I'm expecting individuals to do the right thing, we've got to make sure they're in an environment and that they are really surrounding themselves with options to make that good choice, right? So if the good, safe environment doesn't exist, we can't expect somebody to then make the safe choice. So it's really about looking again upstream and helping build in those practices, those policies at the high level so that people do have safe choices. So what does that mean? I'm just going to give two examples and the pieces that we really work the most on because we think they're most important. Number one is managing speed for safety, right? Let me say, Vision Zero does not contend that we're never going to have crashes. We're going to have crashes. And part of the understanding is, hey, people are fallible. Humans are fallible. We make mistakes. Let's be honest, even machines make mistakes sometimes, right? Even if we were all autonomous all the time, right? There's going to be mistakes every now and then, right? When those mistakes happen, when crashes happen, the biggest factor is really in whether that's very serious or not is speed. So a lot of what we need to be doing is managing speed for safety. In cities, that's things like lowering speed limits, redesigning streets. I mean, we'll talk about this more, right? But redesigning streets to encourage certain speeds and behaviors, making sure that we have separation of road users, right? People driving, people walking and biking, they're moving at very different speeds, right? And they're built very differently. Automated speed enforcement, that's something we're fans of. If done right, if done well, it can be really powerful. So really that difference in speed, and you'll see the image here, 20 miles per hour versus 40 miles per hour, an average pedestrian, say somebody like me that's average build, average health, I have a 90% chance of survival at 20 miles per hour, but a 90% chance of death at 40 miles per hour. Those are big things. So really thinking about how are we as roadway designers, policymakers, advocates, really emphasizing safety over speed. Doesn't mean we're not encouraging mobility. Of course we are, but it's safe mobility. And then the other big piece is really, building complete streets. I apologize, the streets looks like it's cut off there, but really thinking about it, like I said, how we making sure that there's room on the road for all road users, especially those that are moving at very different speeds and different types, right? Again, somebody in a vehicle versus somebody walking, somebody biking, somebody waiting at a bus stop. And to help kind of focus on this data piece, Vision Zero is very data driven. These are just a couple examples. I just pulled a couple that we work with: San Francisco, LA, Denver. I'll pull up Denver as the number, but 50% of Denver's traffic fatalities occur on just 5% of their streets. In each one of these, you'll see a really big disproportionate problem on a relatively small number of streets. This shouldn't shock anybody. I mean, it shocked me at first when I saw it, to be honest. But the truth is, it's partly because that's what we've designed in those areas. And again, this is not meant to blame, but particularly in areas where freeways are touching down, particularly in areas that have been traditionally underserved. That's where we have our fast arterials, our high-speed, multi-lane roads. Not surprisingly, those are going to be more dangerous, right? More vehicles, more speed, et cetera. Those neighborhoods are often less likely to have good connected sidewalks, good connected bikeways, et cetera. So there's this correlation between equity and really the built environment and the policies and where we need to really improve safety. Now, this is distressing in many ways, but it's also power, right? This knowledge is power to say, okay, we know where we need to focus. Everybody has limited precious resources, so where do we focus? So we're really bringing a much more data-driven approach to this work. And we'll go through this real quickly, but New York City, I mentioned, is the first Vision Zero city. They've done a really good job in their first 5-6 years. I think this is 6. I can't count. They're 6 or 7. Unfortunately, their numbers are going back up as most of the nation is, but not higher than their pre-Vision Zero. But just quickly, the things that they did lower speed limits citywide. They added automated speed enforcement. They are massively redesigning major roads. So really stepping up to the core principles of Vision Zero. And they're using a proactive approach. And this is something we know data technology can help us with, looking to say, hey, if we have a serious problem with left turns that look like this, I won't get into all the details, but in this scenario, certain type of left turns where it's multi-lane road onto a single lane road, a lot of pedestrian traffic, let's not wait until we have a death or a serious injury to go fix that intersection. Let's look and say, look, if we've had a problem at, 20% of this kind of design in our city, let's go out and fix proactively address 100% of them, because we are pretty sure this design is a problem, right? So they've done some great analysis on that, and something I'm happy to share. And then I just want to share a smaller community out by me in the West, Fremont, California. They've done a really good job with their Vision Zero program as well. Major traffic crashes are down by 45%, including their serious injuries and fatals. Similarly, it's the same formula, whether you're, big New York City or you're a mid-sized, very suburban kind of sprawly community. They're redesigning streets, complete streets. They are lowering speeds. Jumping ahead just to say, hey, do you think this is really possible? Yes, communities are doing it around the world. It is hard in the US. I don't want to pretend like this is going to be easy, like we're just going to wave a magic wand. But for communities like Oslo and Helsinki, you hear, and there's other good examples to show that when they really put the time and energy in shifting the system, really taking a data-driven approach and showing political leadership to make changes, they do see results. And I'm thrilled to share that this isn't just a bunch of us at the grassroots level cheering. We now have commitment from the highest transportation voice in the land. Just in January, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg made a formal commitment, set the goal of 0 traffic deaths in the US, and really said it, very clearly that, we commit to the goal of 0 because, every single person, is loved. And we want to think about safe mobility as a human right. And I really encourage you to check out the National Roadway Safety Strategy. A little bit about it here. I won't share too much, but it is very much acknowledging that the crisis is unacceptable, that it's solvable, and really comes up with a plan. And not only is there a plan, a strategy, a timeline, there's funding. Let me really emphasize this to you guys, because this is really important. And I'll follow up with a link after this. There is new money. The infrastructure bill obviously was huge, historic amount of funds. But there's more money coming around safety than ever before. And there's funds coming directly to locals, counties, MPOs, and tribal lands. So usually, you probably know, most of the money goes to the states. And that's still the case, still happening. Tons of money going to the states, that's happening. Meanwhile, there's a whole new program called Safe Streets for All, just getting released now. It should get released officially this month, later in May. But it's specifically Vision Zero planning and implementation funds for local, regional, including MPOs and states. So really, really critical. And I'll end there. We've got a lot of information on our website. Thank you so much, Bill and Ecopia, for your support. And I'll pass it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Leah. I think this is actually a perfect dovetail. There's a lot of issues that Leah had sort of highlighted there, and we're looking forward to getting into, we can deep dive into some of those, not just in terms of the new program she was talking about, but in some of the design features that are coming up. And that's really where Ecopia and Alta have really worked well together, trying to expand our content that can be used by civil engineers and other planners across the country in order to understand and highlight areas where we can make improvements to the communities that everybody's living in. David, a quick introduction for David. David works at the intersection of urban informatics, 3D visualization, geospatial analytics, and visual storytelling. That's a lot. He brings years of experience and passion to applying scientific computing, spatial analysis, and scenario-focused storytelling toward the development of effective transportation planning solutions aimed at improving communities. David joined Alta in 2020 after working for 6 years at Fair & Pierce, advancing their analytics practice. He has experience working on multimodal transportation plans, bicycle master plans, systematic safety studies, Python tool and web applications, advanced data visualizations, parking studies, direct ridership models, and station area plans. His current area of focus are enabling data-informed scenario planning, identifying how to align community goals to metrics to track progress towards them, incorporating civic data science into projects with web delivery and computer vision derived data sets, and generating accessibility metrics that can identify the possible benefits of projects and who they got to. So looking forward to having David do a quick presentation, and I think it dovetails very well into what Leah was just speaking of.
I think so as well. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Can you see this? Do you see the main slide? Okay. It's my first time using this platform, so thank you for bearing with me. So I want to talk about the value of scaling context for multimodal planning. And this is occurring just as Leo was alluding to, in a time when the considerations for our transportation planning paradigms are starting to adjust, where, and this is taking from Toronto's Complete Street Guidelines, where we used to be largely focused on speed, automobility, also automobile safety, and now the considerations and goals that we're starting to see in transportation planning practice look at multimodal mobility and access. How do we enable safe systems? Where does transportation and economic development support each other? Environmental quality, livability, and quality of life, and equity. And as these considerations expand, looking at new ways to develop metrics that help address these multifaceted challenges can often require new data and new ways of framing questions than we've traditionally framed them. And we have definitely new tools. I think many of us are familiar with different types of big data tools and providers that can help provide different types of demand metrics. And we've found many creative ways to use the digital breadcrumbs that are put out by smartphones and connected vehicles. But ultimately, this fixation that we've had on demand is one that's still connected to some of the same paradigms of thinking that laid the intellectual foundations for Detroit's first highways when they were being first discussed in 1942. At that time, Detroit traffic engineers were surveying workers in industrial areas and their central business districts about their trip-making habits to and from work. And subsequently, they proposed the highway routes that approximate those greatest desire lines. And while our tools are becoming more interactive and dynamic, our questions are increasingly in need of new data to meet these expanding considerations. Moving from thinking about transportation demand solely maybe to more comprehensive views of the constraints and barriers that people might face as part of making transportation decisions, or sorry, making their mobility choices. So now that we're seeing new ways to digitize assets and infrastructure, ranging from tree canopy inventories to sidewalks and crosswalks, we have new opportunities when we get this scalable view of context, which is that we can have a better understanding of constraints. How is the right of way allocated? Based on that allocation, how does that inform different types of performance metrics? And based on those performance metrics and right of way allocations, where do we have right of way to make changes and where do we not? And where are the trade offs when we make those changes? It provides repeatable and consistent methods. You know, these all new technologies can have error bars associated with them. But so does human decision making when we're trying to make when we're trying to digitize assets, especially when you think about very large teams trying to digitize very large areas. Sometimes the errors between teams or the joined ups that can occur can be inconsistent. And having a methodology where if it's has a consistent error, that's easier to correct in QA QC at a very large scale. Additionally, this can enable new types of scenario planning, and these types of data sets that can extract everything from bike lanes and their widths to crosswalks to sidewalks to tree planting areas. These are all things that once we have an understanding of the existing condition and we load it onto our center lines and we have this comprehensive view, we can start changing the allocations of things here and there. See how much this costs if we put this here. What does that do to network connectivity in this location? How does this improve the pedestrian or bicycle experience as part of a larger economic development effort, for example? And of course, these tools that we're seeing arrive with the advent of geo AI and digital twins, they enable better asset management and inventories, where we can start thinking of this as something that's not just nice to have, but critical to our planning, critical to understanding constraints at a scale that it can be used for regional planning, and better inform how we change our paradigms of transportation planning practice. So I want to go over a few applications that Alta is both thinking of and applying today as part of its practice. And of course, it's critical to start with safety, especially as many of us are looking to meet the demands of um, very, very a very, very large opportunity created by this new infrastructure bill. And one of the examples that I really think is going to be very interesting for how this data can be applied is in everything from safe routes to school plans to Vision Zero plans. And in one example, in Modesto, California, we used an AI-derived sidewalk inventory um, and a crosswalk inventory to bring a strong understanding of what the existing condition characteristics were as it related to safety conditions near schools. So in this map, what you see is a map where we were looking at the spacing between marked crossings across the entire city of Modesto, with the schools and their areas of influence shown on this map. And what we found was, as part of a deeper analysis looking at the relationships between collisions and this type of very large scale context data, was there were some very interesting patterns that I think can be very important to informing how we facilitate safe routes to schools. So, for example, when we looked at the relationship between the location of when pedestrians were struck and found that when they were crossing a street outside of a crosswalk, 2/3 of fatal or severe collisions were occurring on road segments with greater than 800 feet between crossing opportunities. These are the types of insights that a really large scale contextual data set, such as scalable crosswalk inventories, can provide in ways that we just couldn't look at before, or ways where the data was often not available or just considered a nice to have for that type of work. And as safety professionals, when we consider how to build safer systems, these contextual databases can often be key to informing more proactive approaches that anticipate human error and inform safer street and intersection design. And another example that's worth thinking about, once you have a very detailed understanding of your right of way, it becomes much easier to develop different metrics of network quality for different modes of transportation. One example that comes to mind is when incorporating sidewalk and roadbed width information from Ecopia and speed limit information from Mapillary. As part of Mount Shasta's mobility plan, we were able to leverage a comprehensive sidewalk, crosswalk, and other asset information to integrate it into a pedestrian level of comfort and a bicycle level of traffic stress metric. Both of these metrics enabled our team to evaluate network connectivity in a way where we could adjust for the network quality metrics that we generated from these data sets. And they enabled us to give the community a better understanding of how pedestrian and bicycle comfort can impact network connectivity in a more holistic way. Additionally, modal network planning is another area where I see the very detailed right-of-way allocations being very helpful, because this is an area where, as transportation professionals, we're trying to look at what are the multimodal network objectives that we want to meet, what are the key functions of different streets, what are strategies and benchmarks for investments that can help achieve those objectives across a diversity of modes. And when we look at how modes can be served at the network level and the trade-offs between them, we can more explicitly address where performance across the modes and deficiencies seen across the modes have both those trade-offs, and where we can identify those strategies to address them. So for example, with Move Tucson, we evaluated each mode of transportation at a network level, and based on the unique needs that each network segment had, that each mode had, and how it related to key performance indicators such as safety, demand, and other transportation system characteristics, we were able to create a prioritization across modes that could inform what were key strategic investments for Tucson's transportation system. And this is often an effort that we are typically heavily focused and informed by demand, but being able to scalably evaluate right-of-way allocation can inform performance measures across a variety of modes and the constraints they might face. And I think when we think about the era of digital twins and what it means for transportation, the comprehensive right-of-way data can really help us think about um, how different modes relate to each other, and then enable potentially more dynamic design models where analytical metrics and visualization are more tightly coupled than they were previously. And this is where we see opportunities to integrate tools like City Engine and other types of visualization tools to create scalable visualizations to communicate potential before and after conditions based off this very large scale right-of-way allocation data, making it more tangible than just lines in a database, and also being able to generate very comprehensive types of multimodal metrics based on the outputs of such custom evaluation models. So I just wanted to end with some resources that can point you to various types of insights about these and emerging technologies. And I'm focusing on resources provided by the American Planning Association, partially because I'm coming back from the National Planning Conference and still recovering. But one is there is a planning advisory service memo. If you want to follow up with me after this webinar, I can provide a copy if you're interested, or you can ask a planner to pull it from APA's website. That talks about the applications of artificial intelligence in planning practice, including digital inventories and their value, and doing everything from understanding our right-of-way to pulling tree inventories in new ways to help plan for everything from extreme heat to impervious surface cover concerns, such as was addressed by previous presenters. And also the Urban and Regional Planning Resources Repository created by the Technology Division that has a lot of other data resources that might be of interest for those on this webinar. So that's my presentation. So.
Thank you very much, David, for walking through some of those high-level applications. I know that we are really excited to be working both with Vision Zero and with the Alta team on creating national data sets. Essentially, what our team is being focused on is creating that base layer data, especially when it might not be up to date or it might not be in existence, to help understand and give you that background look of what is in existence today, and then keep track of that as we move forward to the future, so that communities and municipalities, MPOs, council of governments, state level governments can have an understanding of where is there a potential to make very particular investments to improve their communities now and in the long term. And similar to what Brandon had said toward the end of his presentation, one of the benefits of the content that we're creating on a national basis is that it's very standardized, and so not so that you're going to be receiving that same data set that is in some of the capital cities of each state can be can be filtered down into all of the other communities across the country, so that everybody's sort of working with the same level of base data. So I want to jump into the Q&A piece. Please feel free, just as a quick reminder, that you can always enter your questions into the Q&A portion to the right side of your panel here. And we'll jump in with a few initial questions for our panelists. And one of them, just to get started, similar to our previous session, is what are some of the challenges that your teams have been seeing in the field of long-term planning for MPOs and Council of Governments in order to create safe and equitable places to live, and specifically in terms of some of the data requirements or the data issues in terms of the design that you're seeing. I know, Leah, you had brought that up. So just I was hoping maybe, Leah, you can sort of get us started, and then David can give his 2 cents.
Yeah, I think there's kind of the many common issues of kind of slowness of having the data you need from traditional sources, right? There's this, I won't go into it, but this kind of strange loop where, serious crashes happen, and then the data gets sent up to the state level, then it gets processed and it gets sent back down to the region and the city. The region and the city can't really use it as official data till it comes back. And this might be a really long time. So there's just issues with kind of how that is, lagging. And then, of course, there's the very important pieces of that data showing the most severe, unfortunately, tragedies. But we know there's a lot out there of what maybe was a near miss, or what could have been very severe impact safety wise, but for the grace of God or whatever it wasn't, right? But so how are we? I think we're all realizing that we need that data, we need that police crash data that's existing, but we have a lot more potential to be proactive and preventative by using more real-time data in different ways. And I'd say also really connecting with health agencies. I think that's a really undervalued piece of this. And I'll just share one example. We know around the nation, and particularly San Francisco has done a lot of strong work on this. Certain types of crashes and serious injuries are undercounted. I mean, significantly, like you see 10, 20% undercounted. Those are crashes involving people walking and biking, crashes involving folks in low-income communities, particularly immigrants. So there's real issues around, for various reasons, undercounting. So really thinking about how do we get a better handle on what's happening out there and be preventative. There's a ton. There's not consistency. There's so many issues, not consistency with the data. There's also really, really poor overall undercounting of non-auto trips. And I think, you guys talked about this a little bit, David, of, as nationally and in many states, regions, locals are really understanding, hey, we want to build safe environments for people walking and biking. We want to encourage transit and non-motorized transportation for some trips. How do we do a better job of building those good, safe facilities, et cetera? There's not a good sense how many people are using those facilities to begin with, how many would, ideas like, travel demand management and scenario planning. It's pretty strong for the car trips. It's not so strong for these non-motorized trips. So there's a ton of work to be done there. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of experience with working with certain council of governments who've reached out to us, especially in the pedestrian right-of-way field, who have there's a lot of vacancies in terms of their base data sets. And so that's where we've been able to help with not only measuring things like the crosswalks and sidewalks, but also their width and understanding street obstructions, so that people can have a better idea of the passable width. And I think, David, you also brought up an interesting one, the heat islands, especially when you're at some of the southern states, is understanding the safety of being able to traverse, not just in terms of the threat from vehicles, but also from the threat from environmental factors as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, David, to jump in, but wanted to.
Oh yeah, no, Alta has done a lot of work looking at how thermal comfort impacts the bicycle and pedestrian experience, and what are design strategies that can address that, and what are the types of data sets that we can use to look at it. There's actually a really great planning advisory service memo that's free for anybody to download about this topic if you're very curious about extreme heat. and Alta has some resources as well about what we're doing in areas like LA and other cities that can kind of address how we think about not only how to mitigate the harm from extreme heat events, but how do we encourage a more comfortable environment? It's increasingly a new realm of safety that I think we're all going to have to plan for and get used to very quickly. I think in terms of challenges, especially for multimodal transportation and regional scale analysis, when you think about classical travel demand modeling and how we've conceived our transportation system, you could get away with a high level of detail on only a few arterial streets to kind of understand how the automobile network functions. And I think what an interesting challenge and how data sets like this, digital inventories scaled from AI, can help address them is that if you think about how we plan for multimodal transportation, you need detailed understanding of the entire street network, all of it, collectors, residential streets, you name it. And when we think about how you collect data at that scale, there's a lot more network than just the arterial network. And when we think about how we update our active, like our when we think about updates to travel demand models that are occurring to like activity-based models and other things, just from an analytics perspective, this information could be critical to getting the level of detail that we need to understand what those constraints are to those modes of transportation, because traditionally we could get away with a coarser understanding of our mobility system. And I think that's where I see a lot of change occurring right now, and that's where I see a lot of opportunity.
That's great. Yeah, so I was hoping, David, maybe you could just jump into a little bit of the specifics into some of the recent work that we did with the Modesto data set. I know you were bringing in a few different data sets there, but just sort of want to talk about the advantages of having some of the base data sets there that you can start to incorporate so that you can have a better understanding of how we can make prescriptive changes into the existing environment.
I only showed the crosswalk maps, but we have a blog post on digital twins for sustainable transportation that kind of talks a little bit more about other analysis that we've done. We looked at sidewalk gaps and their adjacency to schools, where you could even look at where are there sidewalks on one or both sides of the street. But I think what it's really all about and where it cannot really help is kind of prioritize where we address those gaps. Where are there very large where are the areas with a lot of potential for youth to walk to school and the infrastructure just isn't enabling that, and kind of look at that intersection of the proximity to the schools and where there are sidewalk gaps, where there are crosswalk gaps, where both of those things, sorry, not crosswalk gaps, very large distances between crossing opportunities, where both of those things align, that might be an area where you want to consider a project. And where you have areas with, a high service population, that also might be an area you want to consider a project. So I think there's different areas like prioritization. I see a lot of potential when it comes to systemic safety approaches. I wish we got to dig deeper than we did, but I think we were very interested, like, there aren't a lot of research or papers that looks at crossing distances in its relationship to collision analysis, partially because like collecting it comprehensively enough at a city scale can kind of be kind of difficult. And this was a project where originally, like, we were going to collect this by hand. There were hotels budgeted for, and a bunch of other stuff like that, where we were thinking, if we can just work with Ecopia and then schedule some time at the end to review some areas ourselves to fill in gaps, that could go further and we could dig a little bit deeper into the analysis. And so I think when we think about prescriptive strategies, it depends on the context. Different project types, especially safety projects, are going to have different focuses. And you want to tailor the strategies that you pick to the project that you're on and the needs that the data imply that you need to address. So I don't want to try and give too much prescriptive guidance there, but I think it depends on the context.
So, Leah, I've got a few follow-up questions from your presentation as well. You had mentioned just really rethinking how the design of cities are sort of taking place, and I know we had spoken a little bit about the speed aspect. I was hoping maybe to get a better understanding of how sort of what you've seen from your experience with how some of the other cities are a part of your network. What have they seen as best practices in terms of some of the design of sort of the structure or the network of how roads are put together as well, and what are some best practices to help improve the safety of citizens across their communities?
Yeah, I think, the idea of managing speeds for safety is not a new idea, of course, but I think we're seeing a stronger embrace or maybe re-embrace of it. And again, at that kind of systems level. So here's an example of kind of that systemic thinking. There's speeding, right? Sure, individuals might go over the speed limit, that's speeding. You want to address that. And you try in different ways. The thing we're trying to focus on is the speed management at that higher level. So again, how are planners and designers designing the road? How are policymakers setting speed limits? What are they using as enforcement or encouragement measures? Are those effective? Are those equitable? So it's this kind of, again, higher level or upstream level of thinking that's happening. Now, I want to be honest, there's a lot of barriers there, right? This isn't an easy thing. In many places, there are state regulations against making changes or just a lot of hoops to jump through at the state level. But I think more and more, and we can do this again, I think that testing, there's more and more room for testing ideas, rather than saying, oh, we're going to go invest in this wholesale massive change. Hey, let's test it on 4 corridors. Let's test it for a couple weeks or months. And by test it, let me say specifically what I mean. That could be lower speed limits combined with, say, traffic calming, a road diet. Maybe there's, 6 lanes right now, but could go down to 4 lanes with a middle turn lane. And so redesign that street to be literally encouraging slower, calmer traffic and lower the speed limits. And maybe you want to change the light timing, signal timing specifically. I think that's something that communities are doing. It's not getting a ton of attention, which may be good or bad. It's a little bit, less, it obviously is very much less flashy, but there's a lot of room there with the signal timing. But then to measure this and say, okay, everybody's so worried about, time, we're going to lose time. You may significantly improve safety outcomes, i.e. not losing lives and limbs. You may significantly improve safety outcomes and only increase travel time, average travel time by seconds, maybe a few minutes. I think that's the kind of thing, those, you want trade-offs, however you want to say it. Those are choices to be made. Those are policy choices. Those are being made every day without us really consciously lifting them up. And I think, again, better testing, trials, data analysis, these pilots can really lift up to say, okay, policymakers, you do have a choice. Average minute longer trip, save X number of lives. I know which I would choose, but it's not my decision in a community, but the data can help really bring those choices forward more clearly. And I think, again, speed management is an example of really where there's just huge opportunity for that.
So we'll get you out of here on this last question, Leah. I think that there was a very interesting piece that you brought up in terms of the funding that is starting to become available for municipalities, which I think is something that is always was always at the front of mind for MPOs and council governments across the country. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about either one, the National Roads Safety Strategy, or the Safe Streets for All. Because I know that there is a lot of money that goes sort of through the state level governments, but it's always great to have a better understanding of how municipalities can get involved and start doing some smaller scale planning and improvements with other federal buckets that are available.
Yeah, thank you. I would recommend reading the National Roadway Safety Strategy. I'll put a link in a second. Absolutely great. It's not just kind of like big ideas. It actually has, again, measurements and a timeline and how are we going to do this? Who's going to do it? Thank you for bringing up the Safe Streets for All funding. I will hammer on that a little bit because it's new funding. B, it is specifically for Vision Zero and safe systems planning and implementation. So very focused. And then C, it's an unusual case, again, where locals, counties, tribal agencies can directly apply. Now, let me say, because there may be communities that are smaller. I know it's a big question and concern of like, okay, we're a really small community, we're a rural community. You can bundle projects, and here's a role that MPOs can absolutely, and we hope will play. For instance, an MPO might be the applicant, might be the umbrella organization for several communities, local communities within it, or maybe it's a county-wide or several counties-wide initiative. An MPO can apply on behalf of those local communities. This is exciting. This is different. I mean, A, it's funding. Let's be honest. Of course, money talks. But B, it's really gonna, I don't want to say force, but encourage collaboration. Where we know sometimes it's hard to be in different agencies, right? There can be these silos of like, oh, that's a regional thing. We're local. That's state. This is, I think, gonna encourage a lot more collaboration on the safety front. Along with that, there are going to be more stringent safety performance measures for MPOs and for states under this administration. That's not all rolled out yet, but it's coming. We think that's a great thing. But it means that it's not just, we're going to need more than nice words on a piece of paper and a plan. We're going to need to see real action and funding commitment and policy commitment to change, which might be things like, hey, we're measuring safety of our transportation system rather than a traditional level of service. How many cars can we get through an intersection at a time? I'm oversimplifying there, but this is a real opportunity for, I would say, a paradigm shift. This funding is one piece of it, but there's a lot more potential down the road. So I'd say, yeah, tune in to some of this federal stuff happening and make the most of it.
So I wanted to thank you very much, Leah and David. I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to learn a little bit more about how Ecopia is working together with the community, with the Vision Zero community, but also with Alta Planning in order to help make communities safer across the entire country. We'll have several announcements coming up with our national transportation program, which we're really excited about in terms of building national sidewalk, crosswalk, and other right-of-way transportation inventories, including sort of width measurements to help with ADA compliance, Vision Zero, and also that multimodal analysis. So really trying to help create that base data from the latest aerial imagery that's going to be kept up to date on an annual basis so that we can help drive the applications of building the smart cities of the future and creating safe and equitable cities across the country. So on that note, we look forward to any further questions. Please feel free to reach out to Ecopia at any time. And I know that Leah and David put up a few very interesting links. If there's any additional information, I'd always be happy to connect anybody who's on the webinar to some of the, additional information on what they were speaking of today. But on that note, I really wanted to thank everybody for their participation. And we're looking forward to some significant announcements coming up in the next few weeks. Anyway, I hope you have all a great day. And David, just give you an opportunity to sign off.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.